Go.
Welcome to the Sparks Pediatric and Adolescent Medicine Instructional Series. Today we're going to talk about vaccine safety. Please remember that these videos don't replace visits to your regular physician. If you have questions, please call your physician and schedule an appointment. Appointments can be scheduled at our office at area code 775-359-7111. So the question comes up about vaccine safety, vaccines and autism, and this is a question we deal with almost daily in our office. The short answer to the question, does the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine cause autism, is no, it does not. The long answer is this. Back in 1999, a British gastroenterologist, not an expert in pediatrics, not an expert in neurology, not an expert in psychiatry, not an expert in virology or autoimmune diseases, but an expert in diseases of the stomach and intestines from Britain named Andrew Wakefield performed a study wherein he put a scope in the stomach of 12 autistic patients. He said in this study that he was able to recover measles, mumps, rubella strain virus from his biopsy specimens, and from that he concluded that the vaccine caused their autism. Now there were a couple of problems with his research. Number one, the presence of virus does not necessarily mean that that caused the disease. In that biopsy specimen also recovered would have been blood, would have been mucus, and would have been acid. None of those caused the patient's autism, so the mere fact that there was virus present, so he alleges, does not necessarily mean that caused the autism. More importantly, this paper sent shockwaves through British and American medical societies. The British immediately repeated that study with 1,000 patients. They could not replicate his results. Here in America, similar studies were done at Boston University looking at 10,000 patients. Those results could not be replicated. As a result of that study in 1999, vaccine rates in Britain fell from an all-time high of about 95% to an all-time low of about 80% for the measles, mumps, rubella virus, or measles, mumps, rubella vaccine. During that time, a measles outbreak hit Great Britain, resulting in several deaths and several children left permanently disabled. Those diseases, those deaths, those ill children were completely preventable had they been vaccinated. More importantly, during that time, the rate of autism, if there had been a connection, should have gone down. It did not, it rose. So if the vaccine actually caused autism when there was less vaccination, there should have been less disease. Instead, there was more. Come to find out several years later, Andrew Wakefield was actually in the employ of a British trial lawyers group attempting to drum up data to support a lawsuit against the manufacturer of the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine. That was never disclosed when he released his study. His 4 co-authors retracted their statements in 2006 and were disgraced. Andrew Wakefield refused to retract his statement. He moved to the United States and continues to spread his anti-vaccine message. During that time, he was indicted by British courts for fraud for what he had done. Andrew Wakefield stays in the United States because he knows if he goes back to Britain, he will go to prison for lying and for all of the deaths that he's responsible for. His study was never replicated. Nobody can demonstrate that evidence, and his 4 co-authors apologized. There is no connection. Now, I know Jenny McCarthy tries to make a connection in her book. Jenny McCarthy is also trying to legitimize herself to become known as an author instead of simply as a pornography star. In her book, she mentions that her child received his vaccines at 1 year of age and the lights went out, and he became a different child. Ironically, earlier in the book, she mentions he had colic from day one, was a very difficult child to care for, was easily upset, and very adherent to a routine. I don't want to be the one to break this to Miss McCarthy. That is autism. And her child was autistic from day one. The problem is you can't sue the makers of autism. You can try to sue the makers of a vaccine. And Jenny McCarthy has an axe to grind, and she's trying to create some evidence. The question of preservatives in vaccines come up. With the exception of the influenza vaccine, all of the vaccines we give are preservative-free. There's no mercury in our vaccines. There's no risk of mercury poisoning from our vaccines, because there is no mercury in our vaccines. There's no preservative, no thimerosal, no mercury, with the exception of the influenza vaccine. And the amount of mercury inside an influenza vaccine is such that about 250 influenza vaccines equals 1 can of tuna. If you're concerned about mercury for your child, don't give them tuna. Let them have their flu shots. To that end, the state of California banned preservative-containing influenza vaccine about 3 years ago. In 2008, they released a study looking at the rates of autism after the mercury ban went into effect. Rates of autism went up in California. Just like in Britain, if there was a connection between the thimerosal, which contains mercury, in the flu vaccines, and autism, the rates should have gone down. Instead, they went up. Once again, suggesting that there is no connection between autism and mercury. We know that there are at least 4 autism genes. We don't know if these genes need to be expressed in combination or if one gene alone is enough to cause autism, but it does appear this is a genetic disorder, not related to vaccines, not related to environmental toxins. Prevent these terrible illnesses. The consequences of having measles is devastating. There are life-threatening complications, and they are fatal. For the children who get those life-threatening complications, who manage to live, they're left brain damage. That's much higher risk than a hypothetical risk from the vaccine that has never been demonstrated in a single study, with the exception of Andrew Wakefield's study that resulted in his being indicted by the British courts. If you have questions, please schedule an appointment to be seen. We can talk about this in more detail. Again, our office number is 359-7111.